Get your hands off the merchandise. Both of you, now. That was the first thing Yvonne Asante Mensah heard when she walked through the front door of Pemberton Fine Jewelers on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Not welcome. Not how can I help you. Just that, cold and flat, like a door slamming in her face. She stopped walking. Her husband, Kofi Asante Mensah, stopped beside her. They had driven 2 hours from Sudbury for this. Their 35th wedding anniversary was in 3 weeks, and Kofi had wanted to surprise her with something from the store where he had bought her engagement ring all those years ago. The store had changed hands since then. They didn't know that yet. The man who had spoken was tall, mid-40s, with a thin mouth and the kind of posture that comes from spending too many years believing his own authority. His name tag said Craig. He was the floor manager. He stood behind the central display case, with his arms crossed, his eyes moving between Yvonne and Kofi, the way a customs officer looks at a passport he doesn't believe. "We haven't touched anything," Kofi said. "I'd like you to step back from the case, please. We just walked in." "Sir." Craig's voice dropped half a register. "I'm going to ask you once more. If you've ever been spoken to like that, in a place where you had every right to be, then you know what the next few seconds feel like. That particular silence. That particular calculation running behind your eyes. Do I say something, or do I make this easier for everyone and just go?" Yvonne set her purse on the glass counter. Not loudly. Just placed it there, the way a woman places something down when she has decided she is not going anywhere. "We're customers," she said. "We'd like to look at your anniversary pieces." Craig looked at the purse like it had been thrown at him. Then he looked past them both, toward the young man near the door. The security guard, maybe 23, in a black jacket 2 sizes too big for him, and gave a small nod. The guard's name was Tyler Ossie. He would matter later. "I'm going to have to ask you both to leave," Craig said. "We've had some issues with theft recently, and I think it's best if—" "What issues?" Kofi said. It wasn't a question. "Sir, what was stolen? What did they look like? What are you actually saying to us right now?" The other customers in the store, 2 white women looking at earrings near the window, a man in a golf shirt waiting for a resizing, had all gone very still. Nobody moved. Nobody said anything. One of the women at the window looked away, back at the display case, and started talking to the saleswoman about something that wasn't happening. "That is the part that stays with you," Yvonne said later. "Not the man who did it. The room full of people who decided not to see it." Craig stepped out from behind the counter. He was close now, close enough that Yvonne could smell the coffee on his breath. "I don't want any trouble," he said, quieter now, which somehow made it worse. "There's a People's Jewelers on King Street. You might find what you're looking for there." Kofi Asante Mensah had spent 31 years as a civil engineer. He had built bridges. Not metaphorically. Actual bridges, actual load calculations, actual steel and concrete, holding actual weight over actual rivers. He had testified before city councils. He had sat across the table from provincial ministers and explained, slowly and without condescension, why certain structures would or would not hold. He knew how to be the calmest person in a room. He looked at Craig for a long moment. "Call your owner," he said. "Please. I am the floor manager, and I'm telling you, I understand what you're telling us. I'm asking you to call your owner." Craig's expression shifted. Something behind his eyes moved, recalculated. Not doubt exactly. More like the irritation of a man who doesn't like being redirected. "Mr. Pemberton is not available." "Which Mr. Pemberton?" A pause. "The store owner." "I'm not going to." "Is it Gerald Pemberton?" "Or Preston Pemberton?" Another pause, longer this time. Neither of those names was right. Craig would have said so, except that he wasn't completely sure, because in truth he had only met the ownership group twice, and the meetings had been brief, and there had been several people in the room, and he had mostly been focused on not looking nervous. "I'm not going to discuss the ownership structure with you," Craig said. "I'm asking you to leave." Here is what Craig did not know, what nobody on that floor knew except for Tyler Ossie, who had done his research when he took the job. Because Tyler Ossie was the kind of 23-year-old who did his research. What Craig did not know was that Pemberton Fine Jewelers had been acquired 14 months earlier by a holding company called AMA Group, a name that stood for nothing in particular, except the initials of its founder. Yvonne Asante Mensah, Asante, the A, the M, the A. She had started the company 22 years ago in a 400-square-foot office above a dry cleaner in Sudbury, with a business partner named Delphine Achibi, a jewelry buyer with 30 years of experience, and the sharpest eye for gemstone grading Yvonne had ever seen. They had started by sourcing ethically certified diamonds for independent retailers. Then they had opened their own retail space. Then they had expanded. Then they had acquired Pemberton Fine Jewelers, a legacy chain with 11 locations across Ontario and Manitoba, had been the largest acquisition AMA Group had made to date. Yvonne had signed those papers in a boardroom in Toronto with her lawyer and her accountant, and a pot of very good coffee, and she had driven home to Sudbury afterward, and made dinner and not told anyone except Kofi, because she was not a person who needed the world to know things about her before she was ready. She had not, it should be said, visited this location since the acquisition. She had been meaning to. She had a binder at home, a binder with tabs and everything, called Store Visits Q3, Q4. This location was tab 7. She was visiting it now. If you're new to this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Stories like this one, we tell them because they need to be told. Stay with us. Craig was still standing there. His arms had recrossed at some point. His jaw was set. "I'm not going to ask again," he said. Yvonne reached into her purse. Not for a phone, not for a wallet. She pulled out a business card. A plain one, cream-colored, with a small embossed logo in the corner, the letters AMA in a simple serif font, and her name and title beneath them. Yvonne Asante Mensah, Chief Executive Officer, AMA Group. She set it on the counter next to her purse. Craig looked at it. He did not pick it up. "You can look up the PPSA filing if you want," Kofi said pleasantly. Pemberton Fine Jewelers Limited. The registered owner on title changed 14 months ago. There's a press release too. It ran in the Globe. Page B4. Craig picked up the card. He read it. He read it again. Something was happening in his face, but it was happening slowly, the way ice melts, not all at once, but in stages, each layer taking longer than the last. He started. "Don't," Yvonne said, not angry, not even unkind, just very, very clear. "Don't say whatever you were about to say." She looked around the store. At the two women by the window, who were now watching openly. At the man in the golf shirt, who had his phone out at a low angle, whether recording or pretending to, she couldn't tell. At the young saleswoman behind the earring display, who had the expression of someone watching a car accident, and trying to decide if she should run toward it, or away from it. At Tyler Ossie, near the door, who had not moved, and who was looking at Craig, with an expression that was very carefully neutral. "What's your name?" Yvonne said to Tyler. "Tyler, ma'am." Tyler Ossie. "How long have you worked here, Tyler?" 8 months. "Have you had any actual incidents? Theft, I mean, since you've been here?" Tyler glanced at Craig. A quick glance, the kind that answers the question by itself. "One," he said, "in March." The person was white, 40-something, tried to pocket a men's signet ring. The store was very quiet. "Thank you," Yvonne said. She turned back to Craig. Craig was still holding the business card. His thumb was moving over the embossed letters, very slightly, as if hoping they would rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. "I'd like to see the incident log," Yvonne said. "The last 12 months. And the floor performance data, if you have it in the system." Yes, of course. "I can. And I'll need the name of your assistant floor manager and the shift schedule for this week." "That's Diane." "Diane Coulter." He stopped himself. She's on break." "That's all right. I'm not going anywhere." She picked her purse up off the counter. She walked, at her own pace, to one of the cushioned chairs near the consultation desk. The chairs meant for customers who were being shown high-value pieces. The chairs that said, "You are someone we take seriously." And she sat down. Kofi sat beside her. He crossed his ankle over his knee. He looked, honestly, like a man who had been waiting for a bus and was relieved it had finally arrived. "The anniversary pieces," he said to no one in particular. "We'd still like to see those. Now, before we get to what happened next, and what happened next is the part of the story that people who were in that store that day are still talking about. Let's talk about Craig for a second. Because here is the thing about Craig. He was not a stupid man. He was a man who had built his career on a set of assumptions so deep and so unexamined that they had become, for him, simply the texture of reality. He had never had to question them because nobody had ever made him. Every institution he had moved through had quietly confirmed them. Every room he had walked into had arranged itself around them. He had been a floor manager for 9 years across four different retail environments. He had received performance reviews that called him decisive and proactive and attentive to loss prevention. He had believed all of it. He was still holding Yvonne's business card. He would hold it for a long time. The saleswoman, her name was Britt Nakamura, and she had been at this location for 3 years, and she had been deeply uncomfortable for the last 10 minutes, came out from behind the earring display and approached the consultation desk. "I can pull the anniversary collection," she said to Yvonne. "We have some beautiful things in right now. There's a sapphire set that just came in from our Antwerp supplier. Very classic, very clean lines." "That sounds lovely," Yvonne said. "Can I ask?" Britt hesitated. "Are you celebrating a milestone?" 35 years, Kofi said. Britt smiled, and it was a real smile. The kind that happens when a person forgets for a moment to be anxious. 35. That's incredible. It has been, Kofi agreed. Every single day. He was not being ironic. If you looked at him, you'd know he wasn't being ironic. That is the kind of man Kofi Asante Mensah was. Britt brought out the anniversary collection. Yvonne looked at each piece carefully. She had a trained eye, both for gems and for the quality of a store's inventory management. She asked questions. Britt answered them well. Craig stood at the edge of the room like a man, trying to decide whether to apologize or disappear, and finding that neither option felt possible. He did not disappear. What he did, 20 minutes later, after Yvonne had chosen a sapphire and white gold bracelet and a matching pair of earrings, after the transaction had been completed, with the particular quietness of a large purchase, made by someone who does not need to make a show of it. What Craig did was approach the consultation desk and stand there, and say in a voice that had lost most of its earlier certainty, "Mrs. Asante Mensah, I owe you an apology." Yvonne looked up at him. "Yes," she said, "you do." She waited. "What I said, what I did, there's no excuse for it. I made an assumption, a wrong one. He stopped. Started again. "I'm sorry, Craig." Her voice was even. "Do you know how many times I have walked into a room and been treated exactly the way you treated me today?" He didn't answer. "It happens because people look at me and make a decision before I've said a word. You did that today, and the fact that you now know who I am doesn't change what you did. It just changes the consequences for you." Craig nodded. A small nod, the kind that means I understand, and also I am very afraid of what comes next. He was right to be afraid. The following week, AMA Group's head of human resources, a composed and thorough woman named Sargent. No, that was a different story. That was her brother's title. A composed woman named Renata Osei Asare flew in from the Toronto office and conducted a 3-day review of the location's staffing practices, incident reporting, and customer complaint history. What she found was not, unfortunately, surprising. There were patterns. Patterns in how staff had been directed to respond to certain customers. Patterns in who had been flagged in the internal system as watch, without any documented basis. Patterns that Craig had not invented, but had certainly maintained. Craig was terminated. The termination letter cited conduct unbecoming a management representative, failure to follow anti-discrimination policy, and misuse of the store's internal flagging system. He did not contest it. He could not contest it. There were cameras. There had always been cameras. And Tyler Osei, it turned out, had been documenting incidents in a private notebook for 6 months. Dates, descriptions, the exact words used. Because Tyler Osei was, as established, the kind of person who did his research, and he had known, on some level, that a day like this one was coming. Tyler was offered a full-time position with the training and development team at AMA Group. He accepted. Britt Nakamura was commended in writing and given a merit increase. The 2 women at the window, one of them wrote to the store afterward. A short email, direct and without much ceremony. "I was there that day. I didn't say anything when I should have. I wanted to say something. I don't have a good reason for why I didn't. I'm sorry. She signed it with her first name only. Yvonne read it and did not respond, but she did not delete it either. It sat in a folder she kept, a folder called simply Notes, where she put things she wasn't sure what to do with yet. Kofi wore the watch he'd bought that day to their anniversary dinner 3 weeks later. He had quietly picked it out while Yvonne was reviewing the incident log in the back office. The same understated elegance he always went for, the kind of watch that doesn't announce itself. Yvonne wore the bracelet and the earrings. The restaurant was a small French place on a side street in Sudbury that they'd been going to for 20 years. The owner knew them by name. The table in the corner was theirs without asking. The wine arrived before they ordered it. 35, Kofi said, lifting his glass. 35, Yvonne said. Outside, the October leaves were coming down in the particular way they do in northern Ontario, all at once, like someone had finally given permission, and the street was very quiet, and the light through the window was the color of the inside of a topaz, which Yvonne noticed and thought about briefly, the way a person who has spent her life around beautiful things learns to notice beauty in unexpected places, even on ordinary evenings, even after days like the one she'd had. Especially after days like the one she'd had. If this story stayed with you, let us know in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from tonight. And if you've never been to this channel before, welcome. We're glad you found us. Hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories where this one came from, and we tell every single one of them like it matters. Because it does.